The deadliest battle during World War II, the Battle of Stalingrad. For Nazi Germany, 1941 had been a devastating failure. After launching Operation Barbarossa and invading the Soviet Union in June, Hitler boasted that the Soviet regime would collapse in mere weeks. "We only have to kick in the door," he proclaimed, "and the whole rotten structure will come crashing down." But the Wehrmacht was met with fierce Soviet resistance and an unforgiving Russian winter. By December, German forces were halted at the gates of Moscow before being pushed back. To make matters worse, the United States entered the war that same month. The conflict Hitler had desperately tried to avoid, a war on two fronts, had become reality. Germany's situation was dire. The Nazi war machine was heavily reliant on the Soviet Union for raw materials before the invasion. Now, with supply lines stretched thin and resources dwindling, Hitler turned his eyes toward the vital oil fields of the Caucasus. The lifeblood of mechanized warfare, oil was essential for fueling tanks, aircraft, and warships. Hitler believed that capturing the vast oil reserves of Maikop, Grozny, and Baku would secure Germany's dominance. But to achieve this, his forces had to march through the unforgiving expanses of the Soviet Union and break the Red Army's resolve. The campaign to seize this oil would lead to one of the bloodiest confrontations in military history, the Battle of Stalingrad. But to understand why this battle unfolded as it did, we must go back to the genesis of Operation Blau. In the summer of 1942, the German army was stretched thin. The Eastern Front spanned over 2,500 kilometers, with Army Group North besieging Leningrad and Army Group Center fending off Soviet counterattacks. This left Army Group South, consisting of around 72 divisions, to launch the offensive. Though it boasted a formidable force of over 1 million men, it was a fraction of the Red Army's strength. Hitler's plan was audacious. After breaking through Soviet lines and capturing the city of Voronezh, Army Group South would split. Army Group B would move east, capturing Stalingrad to block Soviet oil shipments along the Volga, while Army Group A would surge southward toward the Caucasus oil fields. Yet the strategy had glaring weaknesses. The Germans were already struggling with strained supply lines. Axis allies, including Romania and Italy, provided troops, but they lacked the equipment and training of their German counterparts. Soviet resilience was also underestimated. Stalin's war machine had rebounded, mobilizing millions of soldiers and producing tanks and aircraft at an unprecedented rate. Nevertheless, on June 28, 1942, Operation Blau commenced. Initially, it seemed Hitler's gamble would pay off. Soviet defenses were caught off guard, believing the main German thrust would target Moscow. Voronezh fell swiftly, and the Red Army retreated in disarray. Yet this rapid success emboldened Hitler to alter the plan. Ignoring the logistical constraints, he ordered both Army Groups A and B to pursue their objectives simultaneously. It was a fateful decision. By stretching his forces thin, Hitler compromised the effectiveness of both advances. Army Group A pressed southward, capturing the ruins of Maikop's oil fields. But the Soviets had sabotaged the wells, denying the Germans their prize. Meanwhile, Army Group B encountered mounting resistance as they approached the Volga. Hitler's obsession with Stalingrad grew. The city bore Stalin's name, making its capture symbolic. But more importantly, Stalingrad's strategic location made it a key transport hub. Controlling it meant cutting off vital Soviet supply lines. By August 23rd, the Germans reached the outskirts of Stalingrad. But what followed was not the swift victory Hitler had envisioned. The city's defenders, led by General Vasily Chuikov, transformed the rubble into a fortress. Every ruined building, every collapsed wall became a Soviet stronghold. Civilian resistance added to the Germans' woes, with many refusing to evacuate, surviving in the ruins while aiding the Red Army. The Battle of Stalingrad was brutal. The Luftwaffe bombed the city relentlessly, reducing it to smoldering ruins. Yet, instead of breaking Soviet resolve, The devastation created a battlefield suited for guerrilla tactics. Urban warfare nullified German advantages in tanks and air support. Soviet snipers like Vasily Zaitsev became legendary, picking off German soldiers with deadly precision. The Germans called it Rattenkrieg, War of the Rats. Every building, sewer, and street became a battleground. By mid-November, the Germans held nearly 90% of the city. But Soviet forces, quietly amassing along the flanks, were ready to strike. On November 19th, Operation Uranus was unleashed. In a massive pincer movement, over 1 million Soviet troops smashed through the Romanian and Italian lines guarding the German flanks. The Axis allies, under-equipped and poorly supplied, crumbled. Within days, the Soviets encircled Stalingrad, trapping the Sixth Army. Inside the city, conditions deteriorated rapidly. Bitter cold, starvation, and disease claimed thousands. Hitler refused to allow a retreat, ordering the Sixth Army to hold out. Attempts to supply them by air were futile. The Luftwaffe, overburdened and undermanned, could not deliver the necessary supplies. Desperation set in. German soldiers resorted to eating horses and eventually even boiled wallpaper paste for sustenance. In a final blow, a Soviet offensive codenamed Operation Little Saturn shattered German relief efforts. On January 31, 1943, Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus, defying Hitler's expectations, surrendered. It was a humiliation for the Nazis. Of the 91,000 German soldiers taken prisoner, only around 6,000 would survive the brutal Soviet captivity and return home. The Battle of Stalingrad was a turning point in World War II. The catastrophic loss shattered the myth of German invincibility. Hitler's dreams of conquering the Soviet Union were dashed. Stalingrad marked the beginning of a relentless Soviet advance westward, pushing the Germans back until Berlin itself fell. The cost was staggering. Over 1 million Soviet soldiers and civilians perished. Axis losses were immense, with hundreds of thousands killed, wounded, or captured. But beyond the numbers, Stalingrad was a testament to resilience. It was a battle of endurance, where human willpower and sacrifice shaped the fate of nations. Hitler's ambition to control the oil fields had led to his downfall. The war that he hoped to win swiftly had now become a brutal struggle for survival. This is Uncle Boogie Productions, and that was the Battle of Stalingrad, a story of destruction, defiance, and the human cost of war. Subscribe for more gripping historical content, and join us as we continue to uncover the stories that shaped our world.